They were bare feet. Adult-sized, maybe a little smaller than mine. And they came from the water, from the very end of the dock, and walked, step by step, up toward the house, and then simply stopped. 10 feet from the door. Not turned around. Not trailing back to the lake. Just stopped, like whoever made them had stepped off the edge of the world. I stood there that morning with my coffee going cold in my hand, staring at those prints on the wet dock boards, and I ran through every rational explanation I could think of. Kids from down the shoreline. A swimmer. Someone passing through in the night. But the water that time of year was already cold enough to be dangerous, and there was no return trail, no smear, no sign that whoever had walked that dock had ever walked back off it. The dock light barely reached them, that single bare bulb throwing a small ring of warmth against all that gray, and beyond it, the lake sat still and black and completely indifferent. I think about those footprints more than I think about anything else that happened that week. Not the knocking. Not my name being said through a closed door. The footprints, because footprints mean weight. They mean presence. They mean something was there that wasn't supposed to be, and it left proof, and then it left nothing else at all. Arrival at the lake house, duration, 100 seconds. I found the place exactly as my coworker described it, small, wood-paneled, the kind of quiet that had weight to it. One bedroom, a dock that stretched maybe 40 feet out over water that had already gone that flat, gray-color lakescape before they're cold enough to freeze. There were no neighbors visible, just tree line on both sides, nothing but darkness eating up the edges of everything. I remember standing outside that first evening and looking at the single warm light in the kitchen window, the way it sat there like a match held against all that dark, and thinking it looked exactly like what I needed. I was 31 and going through the kind of quiet falling apart you don't really talk about, a breakup, a few months of bad sleep, that particular tiredness that doesn't come from not resting enough. A coworker mentioned his uncle's cabin on a lake 2 hours north, empty from September through May, free if I didn't mind the quiet. I didn't. I wanted the quiet. The mist was already rolling low over the water when I got there, curling around the dock posts, softening the tree line on both shores into something formless and gray. It felt remote in a way that was almost physical, like a pressure change. My phone had 2 bars if I stood by the kitchen window. I liked that too, at first. The knocking on the dock, duration, 100 seconds. The first 2 nights were fine. I read, I walked the shoreline, I didn't think about much of anything, which was the whole point. Sleep came easily. The quiet felt like something earned. It was the 3rd night when that changed. I was already in bed, close to 11, when I heard it. Not on the door. Not on the walls. On the dock. A hollow knock, like knuckles against wood, coming from out over the water. I sat up and held my breath and listened, and it came again. 3 times. Spaced maybe 2 seconds apart, deliberate, and then silence. I told myself it was the dock settling. A loose board in the wind. Except there wasn't any wind that night. I know that specifically because I'd left a window cracked and the curtain hadn't moved once all evening, not a breath. I lay there in that small pool of lamplight, the window beside me showing nothing but black water and black sky, and I listened to the silence that followed those 3 knocks, and I told myself I was being paranoid from being alone too long. I was convincing myself. I was almost there. And then the silence just kept going, and somehow that was worse than the knocking had been, because anything could be in a silence that long. I didn't go look. I went back to sleep, or I tried to, which isn't really the same thing at all. The footprints in morning light, duration, 100 seconds. The next morning I walked out to the dock with my coffee, mostly to prove to myself there was nothing there. That's what I told myself, proof, daylight, rationality. The fog was still low over the water, the sky the color of old pewter, and for about 30 steps the dock felt like it always did, damp boards under my feet, a little give toward the middle. Then I stopped. About halfway down, I saw them. Wet footprints on the wood. Bare feet. Adult-sized, maybe a little smaller than mine. They came from the end of the dock, from the water itself, and they walked toward me, toward the house, and then they stopped. Just stopped, mid-board, 10 feet from my door. Not turned around. Not trailing back to the lake. Like whatever made them had simply ceased to exist at that exact spot. I checked the door. Still locked. I checked the window I'd left cracked. Nothing disturbed, no mud on the sill, no marks on the frame. I stood at the edge of where those prints ended and stared out across that flat gray water, and I told myself children had swum over from somewhere down the shore, messing around in the dark. It was a stretch, the water was already dangerously cold, but it was the only explanation that let me pick my coffee back up, turn around, and walk back inside. So I took it. Something moves along the wall, duration, 100 seconds. The fourth night was when it changed. Not just in what was happening, in what it meant. The knocking started on the dock again around 11, same 3 strikes, same 2-second spacing, like something following a routine it had practiced. I was already awake, sitting up in bed with the lamp on, listening. Then silence. Then, maybe 20 minutes later, it started again, but closer. On the side of the house. Not the door. The wall, near the bedroom, a low hollow knock against the wood siding, like something had walked up from the water and was working its way around the building, testing it. I grabbed the kitchen phone. There was a landline, which the uncle kept for emergencies, and I stood in the dark hallway, stock still, listening to whatever it was move along the exterior wall toward the front. The curtains in the bedroom hadn't moved. There was no wind. Just that slow, deliberate progression of sound tracing the perimeter outside, and the warm strip of light leaking from the curtain window into the dark, and my own breathing, and then its breathing. That was the thing I hadn't been prepared for. When it finally reached the door and knocked there 2-3 times, same spacing, I heard it, slow, close, pressed against the wood. Breathing. And then it said my name. Not shouted. Just said it, flat, like reading it off something. That's when I picked up the phone. The deputies at dawn, duration, 100 seconds. 2 deputies arrived about 25 minutes after I called. By the time their headlights swept the property, whatever had been at my door had been silent for a while. No more knocking, no breathing, nothing but the lake in the dark and my own pulse. They walked the tree line on both sides of the house, checked the shoreline in both directions with flashlights, their warm beams cutting through the pre-dawn fog and finding nothing. No boat. No car. No sign of anyone squatting nearby. They did find what I'd already found, the fresh wet footprints on the dock, same bare feet, same trail leading from the water to the same spot 10 feet from the door and stopping there, like whoever made them had simply refused to close the last distance. One of them said lake water that time of year would give a person hypothermia inside 20 minutes. Said it like a joke, or trying to. Neither of us laughed. When I mentioned the name, that it had said my name, the older deputy got noticeably quieter. He told me to call again if anything else happened and didn't offer a theory, didn't speculate, just folded the detail away somewhere and stopped meeting my eyes quite as directly. They left before sunrise. I watched their lights disappear down the lake road, and then I went inside and started packing. I was on the road before the fog had cleared the water. I didn't explain it to anyone. I just laughed. "11 photographs. All taken between 2 in the morning and 2:14. 14 minutes, and in every single frame, the same man standing at the edge of the tree line behind the boathouse, arms at his sides, facing the camera. Not moving. Not looking away. His face never resolved clearly enough to identify the infrared, the distance, the angle, but his head position was identical across every shot. Same tilt. Same stillness. Like he knew exactly where the lens was mounted and had decided, deliberately, to simply stand inside its view and wait. Wait for what? I couldn't say. Wait for the battery to die. Wait to be found. Wait for something I hadn't thought of yet. These photos were from 3 weeks before I'd even arrived at the property. which meant whatever this was, it wasn't about me specifically, or at least it hadn't started that way. I texted my aunt a screenshot. She said it was probably a neighbor out walking. Probably. That word did a lot of work for a man standing motionless in the woods for 14 minutes at 2 in the morning, in the same exact position, photo after photo, like he'd been waiting there so long he'd gone still from the inside out. My aunt called it a lake property, which was accurate. This was a proper house, 2 stories, not a cabin. She and my uncle were going to be out of the country for 2 weeks, and she needed someone to watch the place. I work remote, so it was easy to say yes. The drive out was straightforward, the kind of overcast afternoon where the light seems to arrive from nowhere in particular, everything muted, the lake visible through the tree gaps as something gray and wide and flat. The house sat back from the shore on a private stretch of waterfront, a boathouse visible lower down near the water's edge, weathered wood, a floating dock off one side. My aunt had mentioned, almost as an afterthought as she handed me the keys, that they'd put up a trail camera a few months back. Raccoons had been getting into the trash. She said I could check the footage from an app on my phone if I was curious. I wasn't, particularly. I was looking forward to 2 weeks of different scenery, a change of air, no commute, the sound of water instead of traffic. The porch light was just beginning to glow as dusk came on, and the lake was going silver at the edges, and for the first few days, the only thing I thought about was how quiet it was. I didn't open the app until the 4th day. I wish, in retrospect, that I hadn't opened it at all. I opened it out of boredom, mostly. For days in a rainy afternoon, nothing else to do. The app loaded the photo library and I scrolled through it expecting raccoons and wind-triggered empty frames, which is mostly what I got. A tear once. A lot of fog. And then a folder, time-stamped from 3 weeks before I'd arrived, that had 11 photos in a row. All from between 2 and 2:14 in the morning. All from the same angle, facing the tree line behind the boathouse. I remember the exact moment my thumb stopped moving. The first photo, a man standing at the edge of the trees. Arms at his sides. Facing the camera directly. I told myself, okay, one photo, strange but explainable. I swiped to the next. Same position. Same man, same posture, same stillness. Third photo. Same. I sat there in the dark room with the screen's cold light on my face and swiped through all 11 of them, and in not one single frame had he moved. Not a shifted weight, not a turned head, not a step in any direction. 14 minutes. Motionless. Staring at the camera across 11 separate exposures, each one triggered by motion, which meant the sensor had fired and refired around a man who, to all appearances, wasn't moving at all. There are explanations for that. I tried all of them. None of them fully landed. That night I didn't sleep well. I lay there listening to the property settle and expand around me the way old structures do, and sometime around 1 in the morning I heard something that wasn't settling, a scrape, metal on metal, coming from the direction of the boathouse. I checked the app. No new photos had been triggered. I told myself a loose latch, maybe, banging in the wind. I went back to bed. The next night the scraping came back, longer this time, maybe 2 full minutes of it, on and off, unhurried, like something working at a problem without urgency. I lay there and watched the boathouse through the upstairs window, that small weak exterior light barely reaching the water, the fog drifting across the shoreline in slow sheets, and I told myself it was nothing, wind, an animal, the natural sounds of an old structure at the edge of water. But that part bothered me more than the sound itself, the camera. The motion sensor camera that covered that exact stretch of shoreline had not triggered once during either night. Whatever was making that noise, whatever was close enough and substantial enough to scrape metal against metal in the dark, was somehow not registering on a sensor designed to catch raccoons. That detail sat with me until morning both times, and I couldn't find a way to put it down. By the 5th night I'd made a decision. I was going to go look. Not because I convinced myself there was nothing to find, but because the alternative, lying awake in the dark listening to sounds I couldn't name and imagining all the things they might be, was becoming worse than whatever the reality was. I told myself that was adult reasoning. I took a flashlight and walked down to the boathouse around midnight, the beam cutting a narrow warm path through cold fog, my footsteps on the wet grass the only sound as I got closer. The scraping had already stopped by the time I reached the structure. And the door, which I was certain my aunt kept locked, was open. Not wide open. About 6 inches. I stood there with the flashlight aimed at that gap and called out, feeling every bit as stupid as you'd expect, asking if anyone was there. Silence. And then, from somewhere in the dark behind the door, a single footstep on the wood floor. Slow. Deliberate. Like someone who'd been standing very still had simply shifted their weight, just enough, just to let me know. I backed away. I went inside and locked every door in the house, and I knew, even as I did it, that locking doors against something that could make footsteps in a building you can't explain feels less like protection and more like a gesture toward it. After I'd gone back inside and locked everything, I opened the app again. One new photo. Time-stamped at 2:47 in the morning, though it was taken earlier than I'd expected, from inside the boathouse doorway, facing out toward the house. You could see the back porch light I'd left on, a warm smear of light in the upper corner of the frame. And at the very edge of the image, pressed against the door frame from inside, barely in frame, part of a hand. Pale, flat against the wood, the fingers slightly curled, the kind of positioning you recognize immediately because it's the position of someone leaning into a doorway, waiting, watching. I sat in the dark holding the phone and just looked at it. The camera had been triggered from inside. Whatever had been in there hadn't set off the exterior sensor on approach, but it had been close enough to the mounting post on the way out, or on the way back in, to brush the sensor directly. One officer who came the following day looked at the photo and said the lighting probably made something look like more than it was. I didn't argue. I was still in the house for another 9 days, and I needed to believe something that made it possible to stay. I'm not sure I ever fully did. My grandfather had said, more than once in his last year, that something lived in the lake. That it came up at night. That it wanted back into the boathouse. And that he'd built that building specifically to keep it out, not to store anything, not as a workshop, but as a barrier. His family had chalked it up to his mind slipping, the way families do when a story is easier to dismiss than to sit with. But I was standing at my bedroom window at a little past 2 in the morning, staring through the glass at the open boathouse doorway below, and the thing standing in it was tall and still and wet, looking in a way that caught what little moonlight there was, and it was facing the house. Facing me, though I couldn't make out a face. I stood frozen at that glass for what felt like a full minute while it didn't move, the fog pooling thick and low against the boathouse walls, the small warm glow of the porch light doing almost nothing against all that dark, and I thought about my grandfather spending his final years building a lock against something that only came at night, and I thought about how the lock was now lying in the grass, sheared clean through, and the door was standing open, and whatever had wanted back inside had apparently gotten exactly what it wanted. Then it took one step forward. And I backed away from the window and called the police from the hallway floor, whispering, because somehow I couldn't make myself speak above a whisper. My grandfather passed the previous winter, and the family needed someone to go through the property before it sold. I was 31 and I hadn't spent a night there since I was a kid, but the house was still standing the way I remembered it, same weathered siding, same creak in the porch steps, same particular smell of lakewood that I hadn't thought about in years and recognized immediately when I opened the door. What wasn't the same was the boathouse. He'd built it after I stopped visiting, sometime in his later years, and it sat near the water's edge at the bottom of the yard, small, solid, with a heavy padlock that looked original to the installation, rusted enough that it had clearly been there a long time. The windows were painted over from the inside. Not boarded. Painted, so no light got in or out. My mother told me over the phone not to bother with it. She said my grandfather had gotten strange about that building in his last few years, wouldn't let anyone near it, and that whatever was inside could be sold or junked with the rest of the property. The fog that first morning was thick enough that the boathouse had almost disappeared into it by 10 o'clock, sitting there at the water's edge with the mist pulled against its walls, looking less like a structure someone had built and more like something that had simply been there for a long time, waiting. The first night was quiet, or quiet enough. The second night I heard something from the direction of the boathouse, a low, rhythmic drag, like something being slowly pulled across a wood floor. I lay still and listened to it start and start again, and I told myself it was an animal that had gotten in through a gap somewhere, a raccoon or possum working at whatever they work at in the dark. The third night the dragging came back, and this time there was a second sound underneath it, a knocking, but not against wood. Against metal. The padlock. 3 or 4 strikes, then silence, then more, spaced unevenly across almost 20 minutes, like something testing it without real urgency, the way you try a door you half expected to find unlocked. I stood at the bedroom window for the entire duration, staring down at the boathouse below, the cold moonlight making the fog glow faintly against the walls, my own reflection barely visible in the glass in front of me. I didn't go down. There was no key for that building. I told myself there was no reason to go investigate a locked structure in the dark that I couldn't open anyway, and that whatever was happening would still be there, or it wouldn't, when morning came. And I believed that, standing there at the window. I believed it just enough to stay. In the morning, the padlock was undamaged. Still locked. I crouched down and looked at it closely, ran a thumb across the shackle looking for scratches or deformation, and found nothing, not a mark. Whatever had been striking it in the night had left no evidence at all, which was in some ways more unsettling than damage would have been. I stood up and stood back and looked at the boathouse, and that's when I noticed the fog. The shoreline had mostly cleared by that hour, the morning light beginning to cut through it, but right around the boathouse it was still thick, pooling low against the walls, almost pressing against the wood, hanging there dense and unmoving even as the breeze off the lake pushed everything else aside. It sat around that building like it had been poured there deliberately, clinging to the painted-over windows and the rusted lock, and it didn't thin as I watched it, didn't drift. I called my mother that morning and asked directly what had gone on between my grandfather and that building. She went quiet in the way she does when she's deciding how much to say. And then she told me. She said that in his last year he told her more than once that something lived in the lake. That it came up at night. That he'd built the boathouse specifically to keep it out. She said the family had chalked it up to his mind slipping, and she asked me to stay away from it. I told her I would. I almost meant it. The 5th night I woke up a little after 2 in the morning to complete silence. No knocking, no dragging, no sound from the direction of the boathouse at all, and somehow the silence felt worse than the noise, had heavier, like a hell breath. I went to the window out of habit and looked down at the yard, and the boathouse door was standing open. The padlock was lying in the grass in front of it. I could see it from the window, the dull glint of old metal against wet dark grass, and I remember thinking, before anything else registered, that it looked like something that had simply been set down. Not broken. Not thrown. Just placed. The shackle, when a deputy examined it later, showed metal fatigue consistent with age and rust, he said. Nothing that definitively screamed forced entry. He did admit it was unusual for a lock that thick to fail that cleanly, not bent, not pried, just parted at the shackle like something had decided it was finished being locked and the metal had agreed. The door stood open in the dark below me, and the porch light from the house reached just far enough to show the grass in front of it, and the padlock lying there, and the edge of the dark inside. And then I looked at what was standing in the doorway, and I understood, finally, what my grandfather had spent his last years trying to prevent. It was tall. Wet-looking, in a way that wasn't quite right for something that had simply been standing in an open doorway, the kind of wet that catches light differently, that seems to come from the inside out. It stood motionless in the frame of the open boathouse door and faced the house, and I stood motionless at the window above and faced it back, and for almost a full minute neither of us moved. The fog was low and thick around its feet, pulled against the boathouse walls, and the porch light behind me threw a small warm glow against the dark that didn't reach far enough to matter. I kept thinking about my grandfather. About what he'd said in his last year, that something lived in the lake, that it came up at night, that it wanted back inside. That he'd built the boathouse to keep it out. He'd spent years holding that door closed, and now the door was open, and whatever had wanted in had found its way there anyway, and was standing in the frame of the thing my grandfather had built against it. Then it took one step forward. One slow, deliberate step onto the grass, out of the doorway, toward the house, and I lost whatever had been holding me at the window. I backed away. I called from the hallway floor in a whisper, feeling ridiculous and terrified in equal measure, and I never went back to that window until there were police in the yard below. I left the next morning. I never went back.